a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's the 15th of December, year of our Lord 2026. Today we're going to begin with we missed the Common Sense anniversary that happened on Saturday, the 250th anniversary of Thomas Paine's Common Sense. A lot has been said about this being the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence coming up on July 4th. However, you can't have a Declaration of Independence without common sense. And we don't have any common sense left today. And we're going to talk about why that is. What was the central theme of common sense? We're going to take a look at that, and we're going to take a look at how far away we are from that, and have we lost the ability to not only critically think, but even to read it. That appears to be the case with upcoming college freshmen. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And by the way, I didn't mention it at the beginning, but Tony Arterburn is going to be joining us at the bottom of the hour here, just about a half hour. So we're anxious to talk to Tony. So much has been happening. Unbelievable, isn't it? The old saying says, sometimes you have years that are compressed into just weeks, and that really is the case. And we've had periods of time where really not much has happened, but that's not the time that we're living in right now. And so the question is, these are the kinds of times that try men's souls, right? The 250th anniversary of Thomas Paine's Common Sense was on January the 10th, this last Saturday. We didn't talk about that before, but I think, first of all, it's kind of interesting when you look at how pervasive that was. At a time when there was no government schooling, people had common sense. They had the ability to think critically. They had the ability to read, and America was full of readers. They grew up reading their Bible because it was a Christian society that was there at the time. This was a situation where the population of all the colonies at that time was only 2.5 million. We've got cities that are far bigger than that right now. Several of them, unfortunately, and they're not really very well run. But there was only 2.5 million people in the 13 original colonies, and they printed up 10,000 copies of it, but there was so much demand that within 3 months they had sold 120,000 copies in a country of only 2.5 million people. And they didn't just put them on the shelf, they read them. George Washington read it to his troops for morale purposes. This is why we're fighting. It's very important to understand that. And what was the central theme of it is what we're going to talk about. But before that, I just wanted to compare it to what we have here in the 21st century. If you go back and look at it, if you normalize that to the population, 120,000 copies to 2.5 million people, that's about one copy for every 21 people. A lot of copies. And so do we have any books that have hit that kind of level? And actually, no. That'd be about 15 million copies in today's American population. We don't have any books that hit anything like that. As a matter of fact, the first Harry Potter book sold over 8 million copies in the first 24 hours here in the United States. It went on to, with cumulative sales in the United States, the first one to sell 11.5 million. Now, they did sell 15 million in the first 24 hours worldwide. Half of that was in the United States. But we're talking about the population of, that comes down to even fewer per capita if you take it out to the entire world, billions of people. But we're talking about a country of 2.5 million people, 120,000 copies of this thing sold. It was a cultural touchstone stone, right? I mean, this is like Harry Potter, Star Wars, all the rest of the stuff. And isn't it interesting how frivolous our society has become in terms of entertainment? I mean, we look at something that has that kind of cultural impact. The only thing we can do is movies or things like that, fiction, fantasy. That's the world that we live in. As a matter of fact, when you look at some of the other titles that they didn't achieve what Harry Potter did, but that came close to it. You have titles like The Hunger Games or 50 Shades of Grey. Sci-fi, porn, that's the kind of stuff that we consume today. There's not any serious discussions of what's going on. And he was, as World Magazine says, the original No Kings protester. That's right. That was a real central theme of Common Sense. The juxtaposition of rule by a dictator, by a king, versus the rule of law. That was the central issue there. And that is the central issue of our time as well. This is why I keep coming back to it. I don't care what the stated end is. I could agree with the stated end of Trump. Not that I necessarily believe that his policies, his tactics in terms of achieving that end would even work. But I do see them as being a very, very dangerous precedent. They'll be seized by the next person that's out there. Once that power is put in the Oval Office, it's going to stay. And it's going to be used by the next occupant and the one after that and the one after that. That is what is so dangerous about that. And that is the precedent in which we live now. There was so many people that were accused in early American history of being kings. We had, that was the accusation that was usually made, that somebody was ambitious. That's what they said about Lincoln, and that he wanted to be king. The same thing about Alexander Hamilton. Same thing about Andrew Jackson. He's imperial and he acts like a king, that type of thing. That was a criticism. And yet now, Trump actually really embraces this. It's just like we talked about the idolatry of MAGA. And, we're not worshiping him as God. I worship God, and he is my president. I really like that. No, you're putting your trust in Donald Trump. That is idolatry. As a matter of fact, this article from World Magazine says, Thomas Paine got it wrong because his theology wasn't very well informed. I mean, he really wasn't a Christian. He was later on, he was something of a deist, but not so much even that. And he made some arguments on the Bible, and of course, one of them is coming from Samuel, where the people come to Samuel and they say, we want a king. And what does God say? He says to Samuel, they haven't rejected you as judge. They have rejected me. It's because they put their trust in kings, right? One of the reasons why in the 1950s in America, they put in God we trust. We don't trust in government. And yet these people said, we need to have a strong government. That's what's going to do it for us. That's the kind of idolatry that I accuse MAGA of. I think we can see it now. And I think we can see the fact that Trump kids about being a king and a dictator, but he wasn't really joking, was he? He really embraces it, even embraces it in his AI memes that he puts out. He puts on a crown and he drops excrement on his opponents. It's not a joke. The MAGA people are a joke, quite frankly. So do you want to have the dictates of a king, or do you want to have the rule of law? For Trump, the law is in his mouth. Whatever he says. That's why we call them dictators. Are you going to take dictation from him, or are we going to use the Constitution? And so, you had a lot of people. That was always the insult, and that was the fear. When people saw George Washington, he was very impressive as an individual. He carried himself with a lot of dignity and things like that, and people were just in awe of him, even as a person. And they were concerned, many people with the Constitution, have we created an office of a king? That has always been the concern. And now that concern has been realized. But George Washington gave his farewell address when he was 64. He said, I'm going to step down. And he did step down. He was only 65. And yet you've got people like Steve Bannon out there trying to activate the base, saying, we're going to have a third term for Trump. Yeah, in his 80s, right? And which, again, is not only violating the tradition that George Washington established, but also violating the law. And the whole aspect of saying that we're going to have Trump for a third term is really just doubling down on this. We don't care what the law says. We're going to do what we want. You try to stop us. We're going to find some way to get around both the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. That is the Trump administration. That is the enablers and the clowns who follow Trump, like Steve Bannon. That is what they trade in. And they are traitors. The very fact that somebody wants to censor your speech, and we just saw this yesterday, we had the Pentagon under War Pete decided, he didn't want to have people in the Pentagon as a press corps if they're going to report things that he hasn't okayed first. Right? We don't want to have any independent thought. We don't want to have a free press. We don't want to have free speech. People who want to shut down free speech and the free press are the people who are admitting that they're criminals, that they've got something to hide. And they're always hiding behind national security. And so it's not a surprise to see this is something that's coming from the Pentagon. We're going to talk about that in a moment here, but that is where we are right now. And so, as they point out here, he called out, Thomas Paine did, he called out not just for resistance against the British government, but for independence from Great Britain entirely, because Common Sense became an instant bestseller. And that is why I say you can't have the Declaration of Independence without common sense. That is what laid the groundwork for it. And that's why it's very important what we consume as entertainment. And it's why the communists worked so hard with Frankfurt School and so forth to make sure that they were going to push their worldview through movies and entertainment. And so, as they point out in World, they said Paine did more than complain about particular wrongs that were committed by King George and Parliament. He articulated a broader political theory. The theory has more similarities to the Declaration of Independence than the Second Continental Congress would produce around 6 months later. Human beings were created equal, endowed with natural rights, and formed governments out of pure political state of nature through consent. The governments the people formed then operated through representation and were intended to protect the rights of the people. Great Britain, he said, violated the principles of government of the consent and government's purpose to protect rights. So you see, these are all themes that Jefferson didn't plagiarize this. This was really the American understanding, even before Thomas Paine. He just was able to distill it and articulate it. And Thomas Jefferson did that as well in the Declaration of Independence. They were on the same page, and they were reading the same books, right? And so they point out the violated consent on multiple levels with a hereditary monarch, also through the Parliament's aristocratic House of Lords. Moreover, it violated rights, among other ways, by its dismissive treatment of the colonists over the previous decade. Sorry if I'm stumbling over this because this print came out somehow at about 6 points. It's very, very tiny. It's hard for me to see this. But the bottom line is that, as I said, this is World Magazine. And so they came back and they said, well, we think that he got it wrong in terms of his theology. Thankfully, the founders of the U.S. did not all go along with Paine's arguments. Paine had disdained separation of powers and checks and balances. For instance, he thought the best government would be a simple one in structure. He said complex institutional interactions would allow corrupt officials to hide the true blame of what was happening. Checks and balances were inherently contradictory to Paine. And so I disagree with World's assessment. I think that he got it right. I think that we can see now, when we look at checks and balances and things like that, we can see that these complicated structures, yes, they were very concerned about consolidation and concentration of power. So they divided the federal government into three parts, and they divided power between the states that created the federal government. And so they don't have any power that hasn't been delegated to them by the states. There is not, instead of a supremacy clause, the supremacy clause really is the 10th Amendment. 10th Amendment that says that the states created the government, and they only give up certain powers specifically given up in the Constitution. But also, they divided the central government into three parts, and they divided power into three areas: the federal government, the states, and we the people. And when we talk about the public, that really is the common people. And it really is an amazing thing when we see how national security is used over and over again to keep information away from the common people, from we the people. Privacy is very important. Our government doesn't appreciate privacy for individuals. It claims that public servants, the public government, should be private for them. Everything they do is private. That is an oxymoron, a contradiction in terms. If it is something that is part of the government, it should be open and available to the common people, to the public. Everything they do should be public. We don't need to know where you stashed your military, but we do need to know where all the money was spent and how it was spent, what it's being used for. So this whole idea of national security, this Cold War paranoia, has been used as a cloak to shield all of their lawless, unconstitutional actions from us. And it's time we say that's enough. But I agree with them. When you look at what we have in Washington now, you have a situation where it's not just between the Republicans and Democrats who are saying, well, I didn't do it, they did it, or they did it first, or what about what they did? The whataboutism. That's always an alibi for them, isn't it? Well, okay, Trump is acting like a lawless dictator, but look at Biden and look at Obama. It's like, that's not an excuse. We don't want to accept that as a precedent. But then also within government, you have Congress has created the bureaucracies purely for the purpose of not directly being involved. I mean, they create these bureaucracies, they hand the power over to them, they abdicate what they should be doing. And then when the bureaucracies do the wrong thing, they have an opportunity, if people get really upset about it, they have the opportunity to come in and pretend that they're your savior from the beast that they created because they didn't want to have the responsibility. They didn't want to create laws. And so we have rules that are created by unelected bureaucrats. And then they come back and say, well, because these are not laws, laws are created by your elected representatives. These are rules created by unelected bureaucrats. So you have no due process rights. Since it's not a law, since it's a rule, you have no presumption of innocence. You get no due process. And you get no protection against excessive and unusual fines and punishments, right? This is a precedent that began with the IRS, and now it's metastasized to every one of these bureaucracies. And so they don't want to have accountability. And they're constantly passing the hot potato over to the other side and pointing the finger to somebody else. And so the president points the finger at Congress, and Congress points the finger at the Supreme Court, and on and on and on. They just keep passing the blame around. And so I think Payne was right about that. I think even though the idea of trying to divide power to keep it out, it really hasn't worked very well, has it? Do you see any checks on government power at this point in time? No. Do you see any balance between these branches of government? Do you see any balance between the state government and the state governments and the federal government that created it? No, they've turned that exactly upside down. And we, the people, have no power left whatsoever. No, the Constitution has not worked at all. And so they say, of course, the reading of Scripture they put in, he says, finally, God inherently disapproved of kingship, as Payne claimed, because the stories of Gideon and of Samuel. Of course, this reading of Scripture, says World, ignored the passages in Judges arguing that the anarchic condition of Israel was because there was no king in the land. Well, yes, but again, it was because they didn't make God the king. That was the real issue in Samuel's Israel. God was not the king. And they're asking for a secular king was just a manifestation of what was in their hearts. And so we see that, don't we, in America? Don't we see it on both the left and the right? We see it in MAGA as much as we see it in Antifa. They don't want God. They want a king. That's what they put their trust in. Now, the people in MAGA, they say, no, we trust in God. And yet, what they really trust in and what they really look to for deliverance is politics, and particularly to Trump. And so, a man cannot save, a man cannot save us. And the people need to understand they can't serve two masters, right? Who's your master going to be? Especially when we look at this divided power, right? Is it going to be the legislative, judiciary, executive branch? Who's going to be the master? You're not going to have, there was no formal mechanism that you could even point to say, well, they're not really following that power sharing thing, right? But a person can only serve one master. And so there has been a back and forth. Is it going to be Supreme Court supremacy? Or now is it going to be presidential supremacy? It's always been that struggle back and forth. Congress just wants to collect a paycheck. They're out of the running for all of this stuff. Now, will it be the states that are supreme, or will it be the central government that is supreme? That was what the Civil War was fought over. And so the Constitution is supposed to be the master, but it's people that are actually going to execute it. And we have people who ignore, people who prevaricate what it has to say. Those are the people that are in office. That's why when you look at things like Mark Levin's approach, the Liberty Amendments, any kind of constitutional convention is going to be run by the same people who ignore the Constitution now. They don't pay attention to the Constitution we got now. So why would we let people of no character, oath breakers like that, why would we let them write a new Constitution that they would then be free to ignore as well? It's a futile exercise. But the reality is that what is really at the heart of our problems is the same thing that was a problem with Israel when they wanted a king. We have rejected God. Now, the people of colonial times understood the message that of Thomas Paine. What they took away from it is not what World Magazine took away from it. They look at this and say, well, God is king and we need to have gods. Yes, they understood that. And the Christians of colonial America, their slogan was, no king but Jesus, right? Yes, Jesus is king. God is king. We'll have no others. Today, people look for salvation to secular governments. We're talking about America, Israel, whatever. So while rereading Paine, let us exercise the common sense to recognize real kings from false kings, good from poor governments. And I think that they don't quite get it. I don't think there are any good secular kings. And we want to have the rule of law. That is what good government is. And yet we don't have that, do we? What we have is summarized by this interview with the New York Times of Donald Trump. Here's the audio from it.
Do you see any checks on your power on the world stage? Is there anything that could stop you if you wanted to?
Yeah, there's one thing, my own morality, my own mind. It's the only thing that can stop.
Not international
and
law.
That's very good. I don't need international law. I'm not looking to hurt.
I don't need international law. I don't need the Constitution. Is there any check on your power? You wouldn't say the Constitution, right? I said for the longest time, this is a guy who has not only, divorce has become very common, unfortunately, in our society, but this is a guy who not only divorced his wives, but then he proceeded to publicly humiliate them as much as he could, which is really reprehensible. And he does the same thing with the people that he puts in his cabinets. He flatters them absurdly when he puts them in. Oh, this guy is the best, whatever, right? And then when he doesn't like something that they did, he throws them out and he follows them down the road, pouring scorn on them. Same thing he did with his wives. Why are we surprised that he would do this? And when we look at his morality, what a joke What a joke that is. The same guy who just flipped out and flipped a finger at the guy who called him a pedophile protector, the guy hit the truth on the head. As a matter of fact, we'll talk a little bit about that in the aftermath of what's happened to that guy. But you have the Rutherford Institute, John Whitehead. This is picked up on Free Thought Project as well. What tyranny looks like now. There's not any crowns. There's not any coups. Just unchecked power. And that's really what is happening. This is a slow-moving coup, except it's not really moving that slowly. Americans are being trained to accept what would have once been unthinkable. Law enforcement that kills without consequence. Presidents who operate above the law. Wars launched without consent. Powers exercised without accountability and without authority. Again, the New York Times saying, do you see any checks on your power on the world stage? Is there anything that could stop you from doing what you want to do? No, he doesn't see any check on his power. Not with foreign issues, not with domestic issues. He's not going to follow any laws. He will be a law unto himself. It'll be his morality and his mind. And I would say that those are 2 zeros right there. In January 1776, says John Whitehead, Thomas Paine published Common Sense, a pamphlet that gave voice to the discontent of a nation struggling to free itself from a tyrannical ruler, who believed that power flowed from his own will rather than from the consent of the governed. And so the question we have today is, can a people remain free if they place their faith in the virtue of one man? This is what I've been saying about MAGA idolatry all along. It's all just a matter of degrees, right? I mean, they may not literally fall down on their feet and worship Trump, although many of them come very close to that. But it's what they put their trust in, right? You can make an idol out of money because you trust in it. And these people are trusting in Trump and his politics as their salvation. And so John Whitehead said, Trump, when asked about any checks on his power, he didn't point to the Constitution. He didn't point to the courts or Congress or the rule of law, as his oath of office and of our constitutional republic required. Instead, he pointed to himself. And I would say there was another notable thing that was missing. Not just the fact that he didn't believe that he was accountable or bound by the Constitution, by courts, by Congress, or the rule of law. He doesn't believe that he is bound by God. He's got his own morality. And I can't say that there's much evidence of it when you look at what the man is doing. America's founders believed in faith and morality, as John Adams warned in 1798. Avarice, ambition, revenge would break the strongest cords of our Constitution, just like a whale goes through a net. Now, let me ask you, when you look at the first year of Trump 2.0, and we could go back and include the last year of Trump 1.0 if you want, but when you look at especially his return, his avarice, and look at how much money he's made. Look at how he has come in, grabbing money and using the power of government to ingratiate himself with foreign leaders. And so the avarice, the ambition, the revenge, isn't that pretty much covering all the basis of Trump's first year of his second term? And yet John Adams said avarice, ambition, and revenge would break the strongest cords of our Constitution, just like a whale going through a net. Absolutely right. He said our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other kind of people. That's why we're in such big trouble. Adams was not advocating for a theocracy. Rather, he was emphasizing that a government of liars, thugs, and thieves will not be bound by constitutional limits. That kind of government will treat these constitutional limits as inconveniences. Doesn't that look like what we've been seeing from Trump for the last year? The Trump administration has never been more obvious that we're governed by a bunch of liars, thugs, and thieves. A constitutional government survives only when both the people and their leaders are willing to be bound by the compact, by the Constitution, by the treaty, whatever you want to call it. And Trump is not willing to do that, not with the women that he told that he loved. He told us that he loves America as well. Yeah, that's same type of thing. If our freedoms depend on Trump's self-proclaimed morality, we are in dangerous territory. Because, of course, we haven't seen any evidence of his morality. Over the course of nearly 80 years, Trump has been a serial adulterer, philanderer, liar, a convicted felon. He has cheated, stolen, lied, plundered, pillaged, and enriched himself at the expense of others. He is vengeful, petty, unforgiving, foul-mouthed, and crass. His associates include felons, rapists, pedophiles, drug traffickers, sex traffickers, and thieves, many of whom he's pardoned. He disrespects the law. He disregards human life. He is ignorant of the Bible, illiterate of the Constitution, takes pleasure in others' pain and misfortune, and is utterly lacking in mercy, forgiveness, or compassion. It really does sum it up. It's a good job from John Whitehead. He said, however, Christian nationalists have tried to whitewash Trump's behavior by wrapping religion in the national flag and urging Americans to submit to the government, to authoritarianism, an appeal that flies in the face of everything the founders risked their lives to establish. And I got to say, it is anti-Christian as well. This misinterpretation of Romans 13, and we have seen it over and over again. Prime example was the pandemic. Obey your government. Just do whatever they say. And we keep seeing this. What was the response to the execution of that woman by that ICE agent, right, Renee Good? Okay, show your hands. Obey commands. That's it. All these people who keep coming out after us saying, don't evaluate what the government does. Don't you dare think about whether or not this cop was doing the right thing or not. No, you just obey him, or he will kill you. And we hear that same lesson being given to us by many pastors. Obey the government. It doesn't bear the sword in vain. Yeah, it's not for show. They'll actually use it on you. Well, that was not the message of God. That was not the message of the apostles either, or Christ. You do not obey authority when the authority is evil, when the authority is wrong. It was Romans 13 was descriptive of a good government. It was not descriptive of a legitimate government. It was not just, we're already at 10:30. I'm sorry, I'm going on and on here. Tony is ready and has been ready for a couple of minutes here. So thank you. Real quickly before we take a break, Angelo, 1999, when Christ is your king, bullets, bombs, and armies of thugs hold no weight. That's right. It's just a change of location. Change of address. We'll be right back. We're going to connect with Tony here in just a second.
But unlike most revolutions where the people rise against a real economic oppression, in our case here in Boston, we are fighting for purely an abstract principle. Hear, hear. Hear, hear. It is, however, not nearly so abstract as the young gentleman supposes. The issue involved here is one of monopoly. Today, the British government will monopolize the sale of tea in our country. Tomorrow, it will be something else.
It's your move. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
All right, welcome back. And joining us now is Tony Arterburn. I apologize to him for losing track of the time here. and we haven't lost track of Tony, but it might appear like that to the audience because it's been a while since Tony's been on. He took some time off for the Christmas holidays and things like that to try to get caught up. It's been a chaotic time, of course, in the metals market. Things have been moving incredibly quickly. And I don't know how you do it, Tony. I don't know how you take the time to come on at all. But it's great to have you back, and we're really anxious to talk to you with all the things that have been happening. We're now up over $4,600. Gold has gone high. We had well over 80 for silver. I don't know what the exact price is of silver. I don't follow this stuff on a day-to-day basis, but you do. And it's really crazy times, isn't it? And this last week, we just had both of them get a shot in the arm again from Trump because he wants to be the dictator of the dollar. He wants to be the one who's going to set this. And you have to look at this, and I can understand why the markets and why Wall Street investors and everything would be scared of this. Just take a look at what he did with tariffs. It doesn't matter what you think about tariffs. It doesn't matter what you think about interest rates. Trump is going to be setting, if he's going to be the one setting interest rates, they're going to be varying based on what he had for breakfast this morning. It's going to be crazy, right?
Well, the uncertainty is certainly there's an underlying driver of these prices that you can go with the traditional market forces, David. But as I was saying off air, I think, and I started to notice this in the last quarter of 2025 and towards December, I just said, I'm taking the rest of the month off of my shows, of appearances. I got to focus on my business because so many people were selling silver because it was reaching new all-time highs, and every week, and it was something else was happening, new price drive. And so I've seen this, accumulate over the last 30, 45 days. And I'm just convinced now that we're in some sort of fourth dimensional warfare between governments. I think silver is in a key playing role in the currency wars that are going on right now. And I remember when Russia put silver as a strategic reserve asset, that story really stuck out with me. And I've talked about it on your show. I talked about it on my show many times. I thought this should get a lot more coverage than it's getting. I don't think that people really understood what that meant. That was the first time that a major government, especially a nuclear power, is saying, we're signaling that this is a monetary asset for us again. And silver used to have that same standing and especially in countries like China in the early 20th century and for centuries before that.
And as you pointed out many times, the very word that is used for the Indian currency comes from silver.
Rupiah.
Yeah. And
that's the root word.
That's right. And I think, wasn't that the case with the dollar as well? Maybe there was another currency that was that way as well. It was a word for silver.
Yeah, the dollar. It was based off a German silver coin.
Yeah, the
with
Thaler.
A similar name.
Thaler, right?
Yeah, Thaler. Yeah.
So it went from dollar to dollar. So yeah, really, silver, because of the lower value, is really kind of the everyman's currency that they were passing around. The gold was there as a store of wealth, of sovereign wealth and that type of thing, which is what we're seeing with the central banks. But we've also seen a massive amount of individual purchasing, the shortage that we talked about before, what happened in India. Every year they have, as part of their religious observations, they will accumulate wealth or whatever. Typically they would get gold, but one guy say, hey, you need to get silver this year. So everybody was buying silver, created a big shortage in terms of distribution. And there's something else happening with silver that I thought was kind of interesting. And that was sent to me by listener. The guy put out 3 videos yesterday, and there were a lot of assertions that were made in it, and it wasn't possible for me to verify what he was saying in terms of commodity trades and amounts. He said, this is not anything that's concealed. This is not a theory. These are actual trades that have been made by J.P. Morgan. And he said, if you look at this, he said, he totaled it up on these various exchanges, that they were short 4.2 billion ounces of silver. And so what he was saying was, this is about to go vertical. And I can't verify if that's true. I sent it to you, and I know there was a lot of information there, and he was referring to a lot of things that is very hard for us to get access to. But, what do you think about that? As you said, it's kind of fourth dimensional warfare that's going on now.
Well, that's something that we've talked about for years. The role that J.P. Morgan has played in silver has a lot of history. There's some shadowy things that have gone on there, and some some things that are suspect and criminal. I mean, they've been convicted of shorting the silver market of the fraud. Really, I mean, if you want to put it in that way, and they had paid a steep fine for it, and I want to say it was more than once. And if you go into their history, they're the largest holder of physical silver, supposedly. In the world, private holder, other than governments. And that's been that way for a very long time. You got to remember, you go back to the 70s and you had the Hunt family and they cornered the silver market. And I coined the term deep stated. I thought that they were just basically, taken out to the woodshed and punished for exposing weakness of the dollar in the late 1970s, early 80s. And nobody touched silver again. There was a time when Warren Buffett supposedly was, into some physical silver, but he has that pet rock theory. He doesn't do anything, and I think he held some for a while and then dumped it. So nobody through the 80s and 90s and 2000s has picked up the mantle of silver. But J.P. Morgan was one of those entities that started accumulating, and I imagine that they have a lot of analysts who are looking at this as, where does the fiat dollar go? What is silver's uses for? All the factors that would drive it up. And I think they've been, and again, they were convicted of suppressing the silver price while they were buying. So it's like, and that doesn't register with a lot of people. A lot of people think of stock fraud as a pump and dump, where they're just going to inflate the price, drive people in it, and then sell off. That's not what they did. This has been a long-term play. And I'd love to see if I didn't have enough time to verify some of the things you sent me yesterday, but it does make sense that they. Yeah,
I didn't get that to you till really late, and there was a lot there. The guy goes, it's about a half-hour video, and he's got 2 or 3 of them that he put up. But yeah, it is a complicated situation. And of course, there's always been this tension between gold and silver. You go back to William Jennings Bryan and his Cross of Gold speech and that type of thing. But it's we live in very strange times here. And of course, we're talking about how Trump portrays this stuff. He just told the Detroit Economic Club that inflation is defeated. Nobody believes that but him. He is such a bold-faced liar that he will say that kind of stuff.
Probably go into stores. They can get that banner that George W. Bush just had, the mission accomplished. We can get that back over the White. just write in inflation. That's right. Mission accomplished. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had evidence of that. Everybody was scared to death of what he was going to do when he started coming after Jerome Powell. And that was one of the reasons I said, when we were talking about this thing in the fall, and you would see, J.P. Morgan, all these different large banks, Goldman Sachs and everything, they come up with Bank of America. They've got their analysts to say, well, we think gold is going to be here at this point in the first quarter or the second quarter or the first half or this. We see that kind of stuff all the time from them. And they constantly kept revising it up. And it's like, well, we just passed that already. You would look at this stuff in the fall. And I said, no, it's really going to really step up because Jerome Powell is going to be ending his term. But, Trump doesn't even want to wait for that. He is so eager to play games with interest rates and with quantitative easing. I mean, he is chomping at the bit. And so much so that he's going to take the risk. What risk? I mean, his supporters are going to support him no matter what he does. But so much so that he wants to come after with criminal charges, come after Jerome Powell and get rid of him like he did Lisa Cook. Isn't that interesting? I think that's a big tell as to what his economic policies are going to be. Right out the gate, he's going to do everything he can to push every button to have easy money, and that's going to make inflation roar. He's going to pour a lot of gasoline on the fire.
He's an agent of chaos.
Yeah, he is.
The Federal Reserve is a criminal entity, just not really maybe for the building of an extra wing. I think it's for the entire scope of what they've done to our currency, or to our world. I mean, yeah, the very reality and the fabric of America has been ripped apart by a central bank. But don't mention that.
It is very telling, and certainly he has a lot that he can say. How can you justify $2.5 billion, not even to build? I mean, this is not foundation costs or grading costs or anything. I mean, this is just decorations, right? They're going to remodel it with $2.5 billion of decorations for these existing buildings. That's outrageous. But I said, so he's going to audit that, but he's not going to audit the Fed itself. He's not going to audit Fort Knox's gold. Let's focus on this other thing over here that really doesn't matter, except as an indication of the corruption and the just the raw power that the Federal Reserve has.
It's absolutely astounding. I mean, and people are following this like this is a good thing. And I think it's just chaos for the sake of chaos' sake. And the whole thing that's pushing all of this, the drive in prices is the movement out of like safe haven traditional markets where people played and, there's long-term paper markets. This is fear.
Yeah.
And again, it's governments that are involved. And people might think I enjoy where we are in the silver price. I think it should have taken a little bit longer. These massive hikes that we've seen that are really unprecedented we've never since the 1970s. And I don't believe this will end like the 1970s, David. I don't think that, if silver went from $52 to $2 in 1980, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Nothing like that's going to, there might be some pullback, and there probably will be both in gold and silver, and there's profit taking that could go on. But I think we're pushing new boundaries and price discovery every single day. And this is a reflection of the weakness of the dollar, the weakness of the fiat system, the systemic malignancy of worldwide debt, the global debt that is really, it's bankruptcy on paper for pretty much the entire world if you look at debt to GDP. And we've been talking about that for a long time, and it's only accelerating. But there's an underlying, I think, story going on with silver because of the governments that I think are starting to realize that these strategic assets, and especially silver, gold, things like that, they're reaching for the physical bullion, and all the paper markets, those days are gone. And thank God. I remember February of 21, David, they did the Wall Street bets, and they did the Reddit people, and they did this, buy silver, and people were sold out of physical silver all around the country. And they were trying to get the price to move by buying out the physical silver, and people went and bought physical silver out of shops. And one of my shop was that way, and we sold out. And the next day the price went down. And that's because they sold off these paper markets that they used to be able to control the price. They sold off 1.5 times the annual supply in one day and just sold, hit sell. And it dumped that price down. So the spot actually went down. But if you went in to go buy silver the next day, you couldn't get any. And I thought, this is broken. This can't last. This is a complete exposure of what that market was. Well, we're not there anymore. And I don't. You can't go back. You go to the beginning of the year when we talked about the Black Swan event, really with unintended consequences, was just the threat of tariffs and not giving clarification on whether gold or silver or commodities would be tariffed if they entered into the country.
Yeah.
And that alone started clearing out vaults, and contracts were called. It's a cascading event. It needed to happen.
Yeah.
But that was the unintended consequence. Without that, we don't have $4,600 gold on our way to 5,000. We don't have that.
Yeah.
If you remember last year, we hit an all-time high over 30 plus times. I think almost every time I come on the air with you, there'd be a new all-time high.
That's right.
So we're just really an unprecedented, it's uncharted waters, and nothing really in history lines up to what we're watching exactly. I don't think it even rhymes. It is a very different time. If you go back and you look at the 1980s, what was happening to that in terms of gold and silver, that was the shock that was sent through the system because of the energy, because of OPEC and the oil shortage and embargo and things like that. That set off a wave of inflation. And we saw that in the interest rates. And so just in this last week, kind of to underscore that, the fact that Trump is talking about the confiscatory interest rates on credit cards. Well, that's there because they got rid of the caps on usury. It wasn't a federal cap, as I pointed out this week. It was a state law. And this is a tradition that had gone back to the 1500s in English and American tradition, that you would not charge more than 6 or 8%. It'd be illegal. That'd be considered to be usury.
loan sharking, that type of thing. But because we had such rapid inflation, first the Supreme Court and then the Congress, and Supreme Court in 1978, then the Congress in 1980 did things to essentially get rid of the state usury laws. And so now Trump wants to do just a 1-year moratorium on these ridiculous rates that they're able to charge people. It's the most amazing thing, but it really does show the character of the banking system, Tony, when you see how they come back and they say, well, if you cut the interest rates that we're allowed to charge poor people who can't pay off their balance, that would hurt the poor people. That would restrict their credit. It's like, how does that hurt the poor people if they're not allowed to go into debt to you for 20 to 30% a year? I mean, and of course it would hurt us as well. But yeah, it would hurt you, but it would not hurt the poor people. That's almost like saying, sorry, you're not going to be able to drink your paycheck or pour it into the casino slot machine. We're going to prohibit that. But it truly is exploitative. And
absolutely.
It's been there for a long time. And so what I thought was interesting was that first of all, Scott Bessent was confronted at one of these economic clubs about that and said, you're starting to sound like Elizabeth Warren. And then Trump called Elizabeth Warren. So on economic issues, we've got Trump is Elizabeth Warren. On issues of war and peace, we've got Lindsey Graham. That's really kind of where his advisors are, right? As we're supposed to believe that he's the peace president, he's a Republican, and yet he's looking at Elizabeth Warren and Lindsey Graham. They are his influences. But when you look at when you're talking about paper, silver, paper, gold, we're talking about the stuff on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which is SLV for silver and GLD for gold. This has been the way that a lot of people who are typically in the stock market would just move things over into silver or gold. But I noticed what you talked about was something that was far more broken than what I saw. I just saw, I guess back in 2018 or 19, I saw that when gold was moving, the paper gold was going in a different direction or staying still. It wasn't tied to the spot market. And I thought, why is that? And I started looking into it, and then I realized I wasn't really getting gold when I bought paper gold, when I bought GLD or whatever. And that's really the issue. And I think it's something that we need to be concerned about as you see Tether going in and saying they're going to tokenize gold into their stable coins, right? It's not clear how that's going to work out. I mean, who audits that to see if they've really got the gold there? That's the issue with the Shanghai Gold Exchange and Silver Exchange. Do they really have the gold and silver, or are they saying that they've got it and then trading paper contracts for it? It may not be tokenized because it's not on the blockchain, but it is still securitized, just like the phony mortgages in 2008, right?
That's right. And the beautiful thing that happened in 1974, because of Gerald Ford taking over after Nixon resigned, we got the ability to own gold again. It was legal after, FDR from 1933 to 1974. It's FDR that made it illegal for you to own gold. It was, you couldn't. I remember listening to Robert Kiyosaki. He was coming back from Vietnam as a Marine, and he smuggled in a Krugerrand that he bought just after we went off the gold standard. But, you mentioned something earlier that I think, and this is why I brought that up, that we can, own gold, and they may be making a play on that eventually. We have to be vigilant on that. I mean, I think you mentioned Tether and some of these stable coins, and how do they back this up? And, people ask me about gold standards and all the rest, but we already really have one. And that's because we're outside. When you and I have a gold or silver coin, or an ounce of bullion or a bar, and it's recognizable, we're outside of the system. We're our own bank. Same thing with Bitcoin. Millions of Americans are unbankable. And you have these predatory institutions that you mentioned, and they're all fruit of the poisonous tree. We got this financial system that we have post 1971, when all bets are off. When you have a fake currency, it tends to create these type of entities that prey on the lower economic strata. You just can't get out of that cycle. Yeah. I mean, it hasn't been that long ago, Dave. I had to use some of those things. Like when I was between ventures and stuff, I had to get, small loans, weekly loans, stuff like that. And it hasn't been that long ago. And this is the reality I live in today is a lot different than it was, 10 years ago when I had to use some of those things, and they're awful and they're hard to get out of.
Yeah.
So they keep those
it
people
is a
in
trap.
a cycle.
It is a trap. It's just, same thing that Trump says a 1-year moratorium on this. Well, you see that kind of stuff all the time. Somebody, move your credit card balance over to our thing. You won't pay any interest for a year or whatever. Then it shoots up higher, much higher than where you are right now. And so that kind of stuff, what Trump is proposing is just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. And it's not something that's going to work out for the benefit of consumers, just like his 50-year home mortgage is not going to work out for the benefit of consumers. That would be a horrible thing to get involved in. And
price controls.
Yeah.
We know that price controls don't. This is the 70s all over again, but just worse. I mean, just on every scale, the corruption, the amount of bureaucracy, everything in between is amplified. Yeah. So, when a true prosperity would cure a lot of these ills, and a real free market would cure a lot. But this is crony capitalism. This is what happens when all these things, these entities that are tied to the central bank, and everybody waiting on bated breath on what the Fed's going to do with interest rates, instead of just worrying about economic outcomes and building infrastructure, economic infrastructure, all the stuff that should be going on.
Right.
And that's why the new $100 bills went on Silver Eagle. My friend Charlie Robinson sent me a meme that said that yesterday. I thought that's about right.
That's good. I like that. The new $100 bill. Yeah. Everything that Trump is doing is a gimmick, right? He's not, affordability is the big issue. That is the elephant in the room as far as these elections are going. And 92% of people who have jobs, we're not talking about people who are unemployed, 92% of people who have jobs said that they're struggling, according to a recent poll. So when you look at affordability, and Trump comes in, he wants to play some financial games to help you to get a house, he says. But if you are, if inflation is eating into people and taxes and all these different predatory things that we've got in terms of mandated insurance and this and that, all of that is there, and all the government regulations that are raising the price of things and killing industry and killing manufacturing. When you look at all those regulations, if those are there and the society is fundamentally sick and getting poor, there isn't any kind of financial game that you're going to play that's going to help anybody. I mean, it's just something to kind of a sugar high that he's hoping people won't realize until after they voted for it. I saw this article, Tony. I thought this was interesting. Egyptian army holds billions in secret cash as the country misses a debt deadline. And so, they've got all this money in the Egyptian army, and the Egyptian government says, wait a minute, we got to make a debt payment to the IMF. And they said, well, we're not telling you where the money is. I thought, all the money that Trump is funneling over to the Pentagon, and he loves to brag about his tax increase as if, people fill in the blank and they think, well, he's going to use this tariff revenue to get rid of the income tax. No, that's not going to happen. He's going to use it to pay down the debt. No, that's not going to happen. He says, I'll give it back to you as a check. That's not going to happen either. He's talking about how let's increase the new record defense budget. We just went over $1 trillion for the first time. Let's make it $1.5 trillion. Yeah, so we are flush with cash now. It's amazing, but when you watch him, you can start to see the lines of how this guy bankrupted 6 casinos, can't you?
Well, it has the hallmark of everything that is short term.
Yeah.
Everything is short. This isn't long-term planning. Again, not building financial infrastructure, not incentivizing the free market. We're not doing any of that. This is crony capitalism. And you see the breakdown of institutions. You just mentioned the Egyptian army and the hoarding of cash. By the way, keeping it from the IMF, which was born out of Bretton Woods in 1944. This was the old, economic world order that is coming to an end. There's the new institutions are being born, new factions are being born. That's a key indicator, especially since we went off the petrodollar. It wasn't an official thing. We just lost it, right? We in 2024, that agreement pretty much lapsed, and people have been asking me, is Venezuela about repropping up the petrodollar? I'm like, no, I don't think that it is. We're going in a completely different direction, and maybe they don't even know where they're going. But it's the digital currency certainly on the rise, the off ramps for the stable coins and all that. We'll be talking about that in the months and years to come. No, that's institutional breakdown is what you're watching with the Egyptian issue. And I think that's going to start happening more and more. where the hoarding of cash, the hoarding of commodities, because they're bracing for impact. What comes next? We don't have trust, and the trust is diminishing, and we trusting us as far as being the world's reserve currency and this the stable country that we were perceived to be is completely off the table.
Everything is coming unraveled because we're here at the end of this fourth turning. I just saw a clip. I can't remember the woman's name. We've seen her on this Ukraine thing several times. She's notable because she's one of the youngest people in terms of leadership. I mean, we have this gerontocracy now, ruled by really old people. She's in like her 30s, I think. And she came out and said she's been the spokesperson for the EU in terms of Ukraine and things like that. She came out, she said, well, I think when we look at what's going on, we just need to have a drink. This is her remedy. It's so bad. I think the only way we can cope with this is just to get drunk and drop out of reality. And I think that's a harbinger of what's coming, don't you?
I think that about sums it up. When they've run out of run out of tools, whatever's in their tool bag, they've run out of, and I think you'll see that for a lot more, where just people just shrug, because that's what we don't talk about. The elephant in the room. We don't talk about the debt anymore. Nobody really talk. You get like one. You get Thomas Massey. We'll talk about it, but you don't get. This is not even talked about by the so-called conservative movement. I think that you covered that well this week. Conservatism is dead.
It is
modern conservatism. This isn't Russell Kirk. This isn't Pat Buchanan. This isn't any of those. There's no intellectual heft behind any of this. This is groupthink. Cultish behavior and parroting, headlines and things that are void of any sort of thought. And it's really sad to watch, because that's the camp that I came out of. I mean, I'm more of a traditional, Edmund Burke or something type of.
Yeah, no, it's not any principles. They're just trying to conserve the status quo. And the status quo is given to us by the liberals who seek to destroy us economically and in terms of liberty and the rest of the stuff. But you've talked so much about the massive debt that we have, that all these different countries have. I mean, it's just a sea of debt. And so it was kind of interesting. Van Eck, and this is an article off of Kitco, Van Eck analysts looked at this and said, well, let's take a look. What if we were to go back to gold as a standard? What would be the price of gold? It says if gold were to back M0, that is the base money, it would need to trade at $39,000 per ounce. If gold were to back M2, which is broad money, and in terms of that, we're talking about, M2 is things like including savings deposits, money market funds, and things like that. M0 is really just kind of cash that is issued by the government. So if it were to go to broad money, M2, it would need to trade at $184,000 per ounce. The price of gold, in order to cover the outstanding debt that these people have put together, the money liabilities, in a scenario where the only thing you got left is gold. And of course, the central banks have been accumulating gold as if it was going to be the only thing that was left. It's going to be what they have in terms of making a case for their legitimacy or making a case for their new financial system. They're going to need to have gold. That's why they're all racing to get it. And this massive debt that we have, just a sovereign debt in all these different countries, not even including the consumer debt that is there. It's truly amazing.
It really reminds me, and I know people have done a lot of these the analysis on what would it look like if we go back to a gold standard. I was on the when I first went on the air, and I was on conservative talk radio in Dallas. There was a host there that argued that we couldn't go back to a gold standard. There's not enough gold. And I thought, well, no. I'm like, you got it backwards. Like, of course there's enough gold. But they were saying, we have trillions of dollars. You couldn't make that into gold. And I thought, wow, that is, I guess that's modern conservative think, where we have to infinite prints and other things. No, you'd have to be, if you have a limited supply of money, which is the way that you're supposed to have it, and with sound money, you have a limited supply, which what makes it valuable. You have to be fiscally responsible, which means you have to have some measure of sanity. Yeah. You can't just do anything you want and build anything you want and bomb anything you want. You have to have. So at the root of everything that's falling apart for us is fake money.
That's
And
right.
because you can just paper over everything until you can't. And I think that's why we're reaching end game where the institutions are coming apart and trust is completely diminished. The amount of corruption that we see is unprecedented. I mean, all this stuff that it's systemic in everything we do, but it's worldwide, folks. I mean, it's global. It's not just here in the US. All these central banks, it's a sad reality to watch. And for them to, I mean, people will float this idea about gold standard. Well, we already have one.
Yeah.
It's ourselves.
That's right.
And these governments you don't want the government involved with your gold, in my opinion, because look at what happened in 1933.
That's right.
I like the free market. Let the free market decide. You can have your fiat currencies. I mean, I would love it if we had a consensus in this country about fiscal responsibility and the evils of central banking and all the rest of that. But we're not anywhere near there. And if they would just take that and then they make it into a gold standard, it's not good for us. Yeah, your gold might go up and you're told to sell it or whatever it is. I just don't subscribe to that.
Yeah, that's right.
To that theory.
I got a couple of questions for you from listeners here. Hatchcar61 said, excellent that Tony's back. Can you please ask him why Wolfpack packages are taking longer to be delivered?
Well,
Things are crazy,
that's something
right?
on the, well, my crew, and by the way, I have just great people, and I look around sometimes like, how did all these people show up? I have wonderful people, and we ship everything out of Missouri. It has been a really efficient last 30 days. I know my crew's doing a great job. I think the mail is something that if you're going USPS, some packages do, or UPS. That's an interesting question. You can always mail into the crew. I want to check your tracking number. Most of the time, we're in real time. Like if your card gets charged like on a Monday, most of the time, like on a Wednesday, you've already got a tracking number. So I don't know. I'd have to look.
I know
at
things
that.
are changing in terms of shipping, and we've used a service called Sendle, and they just kicked us off. Karen is saying, "What is going? Did they go out of business?" No, they didn't go out of business, and she's asking them questions, and they won't respond to her. And it's like,
Right.
I don't know. We've been debanked in the past. We now been deshipped. I don't know what's going on with it, but
Well,
we can
I wanna
still take stuff down to the post office and put it through. But there's some crazy things going on, and Amazon has just said they're not going to use the postal system anymore. So that's going to be a big hit for the postal system, just like it was for UPS when they didn't have that business. And so, there's a lot of things that are happening right now on the shipping side of it as well.
It really is, but I think it's all things, David. So many companies that I used to rely on for service and other things. You don't get the competency.
Yeah,
isn't there? I ask other entrepreneurs and other people, and they say, no, this is real.
yeah,
you're not going insane. It's not. It's just not the same. And even UPS, we have issues. It's funny because the girls who run my Branson shop, who do all the packing, they're used to run a UPS store. And I asked her, I said, so when we put in a claim with UPS, have we ever gotten the package back? Because when we lose a package for Wolfpack, I just replace it. So I just eat it. Like I don't ever get it back. And so it's funny. I'm like, have we ever gotten one back on a claim? She said, no. I'm like, so we just put it in just for the record. We put it in, we never get that back. And used to, there would be a lot more of an investigation process. And no, I just think that's everywhere. So at least Wise Wolf, we've still got, you can get a whole, people call all the time and I answer the phone. And why wouldn't I? I mean,
it's kind of like what you're talking about. We're seeing this everywhere. It's Cory Doctorow, the science fiction writer. It's kind of a rude term, but he calls it enshittification.
Yes.
That's really what's happening to everything. It's not just the software stuff and not just things online, but it's just everything.
Everything.
Things have gotten so complicated that nothing is working anymore. Like it seems like AP Rumble Seat says, I would trust Tony, but can you talk about flexibility to sell if you might need to? Is that at all viable? I don't know much about metal investments, he says.
I mean, we're buying. I don't think this is a great time to sell.
Right.
I mean, honestly, because
Right.
you need to wait for things to stabilize. And because of the whipsawing that's gone back and forth, my buying rates, I'm at 85% of spot on anything over an ounce of silver. And people, why would you be that way? It's because of there's no end buyers. David, I won't name the institutions. I'm 3 weeks from getting paid for a very, very large orders that have been with wholesalers. 3 weeks.
Wow.
That means that I had to take it out. People sold me stuff. I sold it to the trading floor. Trading floor hasn't paid me.
Wow.
And that's because they're backed up.
Yeah.
And, that's bottlenecked everywhere. So I've had to make tough decisions on, what I'm actually percentages I'm buying for. Now, if you're a Wolfpack member or if you're a David Knight listener, just call me. We can do something a little bit different. But the majority of the times for like physical walk-in shops, and by the way, it hasn't slowed much down. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just am able to, I have a little bit more flexibility. I have to go sell stuff to the refiners or whatever. But, we don't have in this market. And what's funny is you see rising prices, but limited retail buyers. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because institutions are buying, folks.
Yeah.
Institutions.
That's right.
And it's not, and there's an article.
We had that last year. I remember that video. We talked about it at that point in time. There was a silver show, like a gold and silver show, like have gun shows and things. And this guy goes around, he talks to all the different dealers, and they said, silver, everybody wants to sell silver, but the institutional buyers are getting everything. The price is going up, but they're just, the people off the street are coming in and they're not buying silver, but it's all institutional in terms of buying.
It's institutional.
Yeah. Maybe they know something, and maybe, well, the other thing.
They do know something. And I think it's government. It's institutional, but more importantly, more than market forces, I think it's governmental.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's the chaos and volatility that we see everywhere. And, it's not just the tariffs that have created that kind of an issue. It is something that's happening through every type of business. Wally Walrus says gold got Gaddafi killed.
Yeah, it did.
That's absolutely right. We got the emails from Hillary Clinton talking about that and, how they can't have him set up another standard in competition to the kind of fiat system that they had in Europe. The banks don't want that. So
yeah, that was peak fiat. That was peak fiat was with Gaddafi, and what happened? He wanted to do a African backed gold backed currency there. Mm-hmm. And interesting is the Hunt family used to own the oil rights in Libya, and there was that. Coup d'etat and the revolution. You got a Colonel Gaddafi. Stayed a colonel. Never graduated out of being a colonel.
The Hunts are right there at the epicenter of a lot of things, weren't they?
They were the epicenter of that too. Yeah, that was peak fiat. If you go back to 2009, interesting metric. After the great financial crisis, central bank buying of gold was almost at zero, and they would just relied on the dollar. I mean, market holdings were dollars. The world transacted in dollars, and that's the way it was until that. And that was a watershed moment, and central banks started buying gold, and now everything is just a race, not only for gold, but I think minerals, silver, copper, all these other things that are going on, things that make that actually society runs off of, and away from the fiat system. They know what's going on, and that's the central banks are the institutions are signaling to you folks what the future is.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Well, gold in terms of the things that we have any control over is one of the few things that we can do, I think, to actually try to move against this tide of chaos. Is the one thing that has basically retained its value. And again, we look to God for our real provision, but in terms of things that we have control over that we should do something about. That is one of the few things that we can do to kind of guard against and hedge against this kind of chaos and volatility that is deliberate, is being put out there. It's not just stupidity. It is deliberate what is being done out there. And so I really do appreciate what you do. Tony, worked with you for many years. And what you do is you provide a way for people to get into that on a small, regular basis with Wolfpack. That is a really important thing. Of course, you can handle large transactions one way or the other, but the idea that people can save gradually and you make that service available, that is really a valuable service for people to be able to gradually save into that, whatever they can put aside for the rainy day, because, folks, there's a storm on the way, big storm. They like to talk about that.
We still got some time to dollar cost average. I think
that's right.
Somebody emailed me yesterday and said that they'll come back to Wolfpack when prices go down. I thought, I don't know. It reminded me of that meme of the skeleton sitting at the computer, like I don't know when prices are going to come down. I'm sure,
And I don't know how you
can,
do your
but
job
I don't
because
know.
I don't know how how do you, when it's this volatile, how do you understand where things are going? It's got to really be difficult.
I got a good team. I have a good team, and we did a lot of planning for this. I think we just it accelerated and went past. So I wasn't fully prepared. That's why I had to take December and part of January off. It's just been
well. That's what we talk
to
about.
keep up with it.
Yeah, that's what we talk about. When we talk about hyperinflation and how prices are constantly changing in Germany or Zimbabwe or whatever, and it's just total chaos like that. And yet, what you're living with, things are changing so quickly in gold and silver. It's like having to do business in a hyperinflation environment.
Yes,
which is what you're looking at.
Yeah, imagine and like you amplify it over your shops, and then you got the direct sales, and you got Wolfpack, and he's trying to constantly keep up with can you keep the lights on because you have so many price fluctuations. And we've been pretty lucky because the deals that I needed walked in when they do. Like, I need the supply, I get the supply. So we're okay.
That's good.
And I'm glad that we're built the way I'm glad I'm not over leveraged, David. I'm glad I had that instinct to go hoard things or do things, or become a different type of company, like I just know my limitations and what we were built to do. And Wise Wolf was designed to be more closer to the earth to regular people. We're not going to be this giant conglomerate. I don't want that for my company. I think the size that we are is perfect.
Yeah.
To serve, we can serve nationally, we can serve locally, and keep up with prices. And that's where we are right now. But yeah, it's been an interesting time. I look forward to our talks weekly. I want to make sure that we're doing this weekly again. I think it's good for both of us. And just kind of
it's been great talking to you. Yeah. It's been a while, and tomorrow we're going to have Gerald Slinty. It's been a while since we've talked to Gerald Slinty as well. He's going to be on with us tomorrow.
Oh, good! I can't wait for that.
We'll get his trends and predictions for 2026. We'll see which war he wants to focus on the most. It's like a smorgasbord there. Every day it's another war for Trump. It's crazy. But thank you so much, Tony, for coming on. And again, you can go to davidknight.gold, and that will take you to Wise Wolf Gold, Tony Arterburn. That'll let him know that you're coming from us. And so thank you, Tony, for what you do. It's been a great year this year. And I know that it's going to be a great year for gold and silver this next year as well. When you look at, like you said, it's not going to be like 1980, because 1980, the price of gold and silver was really a response to the shock of inflation from OPEC. And once that tapered down and they got that under control, then gold and silver went back down. But when we look in the horizon, what we're seeing here with this is completely different. We have so many different trends, and they're not external, they're internal. And you got all of these different things coming together all at once. It really is like a perfect storm. It's like three storms. I guess that was one thing. What was it? The QAnon people, the storm is coming. Well, they're right. Not in the way that they meant it, though. But it is a storm that is coming.
That's true.
And it is a bipartisan storm that's been building up off the coast for a very long time and been building up in Washington for a very long time. So thank you again, Tony. Appreciate it. davidknight.gold will take you to Tony. Thank you, Tony. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back.
Listening to The David Knight Show.
Well, it's not a big issue in the scheme of things, but it does talk about the character of these masked militarized police. ICE reportedly stole a 10th grader's phone, then apparently sold it for cash. ICE agents reportedly stole a teenage boy's phone and then seemingly pawned it for cash afterwards. This is a report from ProPublica. They said that this boy and his father were on their way to McDonald's. His father was an illegal alien. They were pulled over by the masked agents. After several agents violently tackled his father to the ground, with one pressing a knee into his neck, another put the 16-year-old in a suffocating chokehold. When he told the agent he was a child and a minor, the agent didn't stop. I started screaming with everything I had because I couldn't even breathe, he said. I felt like I was going to pass out and die. He was taking photos of the encounter with his phone. That was then confiscated as he was taken into custody. Later, when he used his Find My iPhone feature to track down his device, it led him to a vending machine for used electronics that was several miles away, but it was near an ICE detention center, according to reporting. Someone, and we can only guess who, had apparently sold his phone after ICE had confiscated it. The idea of ICE stealing and then selling somebody's phone is jarring. As one person said, well, this is not the key part of the story, obviously, but they sold his phone. This is not to be a surprise when we look at the corruption of secret police, militarized police. Police, as I pointed out, a giant army that would be the 14th largest military budget in the world if they were a separate country, but they're not, unfortunately. We have armies of domestic police, boots on the ground here in America, boots on our necks here in America. And of course, a big part of what they're interested in is surveillance. They're pouring in tens of millions of dollars into one surveillance program after the other, whether it's the roads or the streets, car license plate recognition, flock cameras looking at your car and profiling your car, or biometric information on your face. They're looking at what you're doing on social media. They're looking at your phones, all of this. But you're not allowed to photograph them. You're not allowed to take their picture. And they're wearing masks, and they will get in your face with their masked face, knock your phone to the ground, knock you to the ground. And that's just the beginning of what they'll do.
Also, I want to point out, this sort of behavior is incredibly common.
Yeah.
It happens so frequently with the TSA.
Yeah.
It's not as visible because generally the TSA isn't tackling you and throwing you to the ground. They just have easy access to your stuff, which they steal and then sell very regularly.
And they don't like being photographed either, right?
Because you have no recourse. It's your word against theirs. Oh, oops, I wonder how that happened.
That's right. Yeah. You better believe I'm going to photograph any encounter I have with the government and keep a record of it. Anyway, so again, the fact that they would find this near an ICE detention center. And so after being detained and released by ICE, his family took him to the Texas Children's Hospital, where staff moved him to a trauma unit after identifying signs of a chokehold. The doctors ordered dozens of CT scans, x-rays, including for his head, neck, and spine. His family says that the agents threatened to charge him with assaulting an officer unless his dad agreed to be deported. That's how these guys work. So the father is now in Mexico. Well, again, you can take the approach, well, they should never have come here in the first place. Well, I agree, but look, do we really want to have a government like this? Do we really want to have these guys who pretend to be police, who pretend to enforce laws when they say that there's no law for them, who are given carte blanche to do whatever they wish? They steal property from people. They bully and hurt 16-year-olds. They blackmail family members. Is that really what we want from our government? That is a foolish bargain. Like, I understand, and if you've listened to me over the years, that I don't agree with illegal immigration. And that is a big point with me. This is as big a point with me as it is with MAGA, but the means matter. How you do this makes all the difference in the world. And so you've got some who are talking about impeaching Kristi Noem. Unfortunately, here's the headline: nuclear option is launched against Kristi Noem by 70 Democrats. 70? Only 70. Only Democrats. That's what's disgusting about all this. When you look at how many Democrats are, there's 213 Democrats in the House. 70 of them, that's only 32%. That's just under a third, okay? of the Democrats want to impeach Kristi Noem. Impeachment ought to be the least that happens to this woman. I mean, I just showed you the other day that she did a speech. One of ours, all of yours. I mean, this is the literal slogan of the Nazis when they destroyed villages. You kill one of ours, like Heydrich, we'll kill everybody in your village, and we want you to know that. That's what she's doing. I know it sounds tiresome to Homeland Security to be called Nazis all the time. Well, then stop acting like Nazis. And when you look at Iran, for example, as I said the other day, the only difference between these Iranian, quote unquote, law enforcement people that are murdering people in the streets and our ICE agents is the flag that they fly. You take down that Iranian flag, you put up an American flag, and all the MAGA people going, hoorah, hoorah, USA, USA, we love this stuff. I don't. Authoritarianism is authoritarianism. Doesn't matter what flag you fly. These people always act the same way. This cartoon here, this is MAGA, for example. Well, at least we're safe from immigrants, right? And the man and woman have a QR code on their sweater. They got a barcode on their forehead. There's an army of police around them. There's drones above them. There's cameras beside them. This is what the people who are so overwhelmingly concerned about the open borders, and understand, folks, the open borders were created by both Republicans and Democrats. It's worse under the Democrats, but the Republicans didn't do anything about it either. And so they created this problem because their solution is to have the police state. Just like they created the pandemic, which didn't exist, because their solution was a bioweapon vaccine. You don't want their solution, and you don't be fooled by what these people are doing. I'm going to take a real quick break, folks, and we're going to come back. I want to finish what I was saying about common sense, because we don't have any common sense. And we need to make sense common again, don't we? We'll be right back.
The globalists' next move. And now, the David Knight Show.
Well, welcome back. And I want to go back to what John Whitehead is working on, because, he's talking about Thomas Paine. And I got to say, I would nominate John Whitehead as the Thomas Paine of our time if I had to pick somebody. But he goes back, he quotes Madison and Jefferson. Madison saying, if men were angels, we wouldn't need government, right? And Jefferson said, yeah, but in questions of power, let no more be heard in the confidence of man, but bind him down from mischief with the chains of the Constitution. But these are chains that have been easily snapped. As he points out, Trump speaks in the language of kings, of strong men, of would-be emperors advocating for personal rule over constitutional government. America's founders rejected that logic. They revolted against tyranny. They built for themselves a system of constitutional restraints, checks, balances, divided authority through separation of power, and, this is the key thing, an informed, vigilant populace. Jefferson said, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. That's why ICE hates you filming them. Think about that. All the hard work of the founders is being undone, not by accident, and it's not being done overnight. This is not about left versus right. It's not even about whether Trump is a savior or villain. It's about the danger of concentrating unchecked power in any one individual, regardless of political party, regardless of their personality or their character or their lack of character. The end does not justify the means, right? That's what we have to understand over and over again. We have to keep coming back to that. Power can be used for the right reasons today, but it will be used for the wrong reasons tomorrow. History shows that once the machinery of oppression is built, once we have the surveillance systems, the militarized enforcement, the emergency authorities, it does not care who operates the controls. The only question is, who will be targeted next? This is why it's so amazing to me. You see the left and the right constantly going back to January 6th. What lesson did either of them learn other than rabid partisanship? Nothing. When you look at Jon Stewart, he's like, or Jesse Ventura, whatever the left is, they look at it and they see the people that were fighting the cops that were there. They don't see what happened before. They don't care what happened afterwards to people who were peaceful protesters. And then you look at the right, and they don't, even though they saw the weaponization of government, they want more power given to the president. Just after they saw the corruption of the Biden administration. Oh, let's give more power to Washington. No, you need to devolve power away from Washington because there will be another Biden. You just want to make sure he doesn't have the power. I can't understand why the left and the right took these lessons. And this is the understanding of the grassroots people and that I'm talking about. Trump's 2.0 has done more to dismantle the nation's constitutional guardrails than any other time in history. This is now unfolding through emergency declarations, warrantless raids, speech-based detentions, unaccountable surveillance, military actions launched without consent, debate, or constitutional authority. Just one individual that is doing all of this stuff, and we don't, that's the danger of it. He says, and so we look at the sequence that always, that despotism always follows. First of all, power is centralized. Well, we can check that box, can't we? And then the next one is accountability is dismantled. Certainly see that as well, don't we? And then finally, once law no longer restrains power, force takes its place. If we had a map, we would have an arrow. You are here. This is the stage that we're at. Just like the other day, we were talking about the way that civilizations collapse, and we checked off of the 5 different steps. We're at step number 4 right now. Step number 5 is about to begin. If this is how Trump intends to celebrate the country's 250th birthday, it's maybe by reenacting what the king did, the abuses that drove Americans to a revolt in 1776. Someone might need to clue him into the fact that it ended with Americans rejecting tyranny and absolute rule. That's what I hear when I hear J.D. Vance talking about how these ICE agents have absolute immunity. No, they don't. And if they do, shame on us for allowing that to happen. Not under a system of law do they have absolute immunity. Under a system of tyranny, they do. When I heard that, folks, I don't care what else J.D. Vance says or does. Not that I was supporting him before. I got a lot of questions about how this chameleon has moved himself around the political spectrum in order to ingratiate himself to the technocrats. I have issues with his making money off these self-amplifying mRNA jabs and many other things that J.D. Vance does. He's the hand-picked salesman for the technocracy. And you can see that when he says, our people get absolute immunity. Well, if that's the way this is going to work, our system is done right now at this point. If you're talking about absolute immunity, absolute tyranny is what we're talking about here. Consumed with visions of global conquest and military expansion, Trump has treated sovereignty as negotiable, international law as inconvenient. And we just had this happen yesterday with the people from Greenland and Denmark coming in. And when I looked on social media, I saw these people say, oh, yeah, look, they're trying to pretend that they're brave, but they're going to cave. This is Trump. He's strong. These are the influencers, that some of the most despicable people I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I would never have believed that there would be people like this that I see on social media, and they call themselves conservatives. It's crazy. The Trump administration is justifying the cold-blooded assassination of an American citizen by a masked gunman as an act of self-defense and declaring, we have absolute immunity and we're not going to be, nobody's even going to investigate us. We're going to shut down the investigation from the get-go. They told absurd, made-up lies that bore no resemblance to the facts of the thing because of their utter contempt and their certainty that X and social media and their influencers would cover for them. ICE agents have been battering down doors, ramming into private homes, carrying out warrantless militarized raids that treat constitutional protections as an inconvenience and human beings as expendable obstacles. I would say as their personal livestock is the way they treat us with this. When a president surrounds himself with military parades, inflates defense budgets to obscene levels, deploys federal forces against the civilian population, and insists that his personal morality is the only safeguard against abuse, the republic is no longer drifting toward tyranny. It is sliding downhill fast. And when ego becomes policy, the results are predictable: perpetual war, endless surveillance, normalized violence, a criminalization of dissent, a public conditioned to accept abuses in the name of security and patriotism. Well, at least we don't have any more immigrants, right? Because who would want to come here? The Trump influencers and explainers are, in my opinion, enemies of the Constitution. They're enemies of liberty as well. And this, their appeasement for Trump really is just beyond disgusting. It's not blind loyalty from the influencers. They actually see what's going on. They are putting out the eyes of the people who listen to them and plugging their ears to the sense that they can't. They're told, don't believe what you see. Don't believe what you hear. It's the worst kind of groupthink and doublethink. Thomas Paine warned that a long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right. And this is the essence, I think, of this whataboutism. Oh, well, what about what Biden did or what Obama did or whatever? Whenever Trump is doing something that is criminal, that they did and got away with, we need to say this is enough. We're going to stop passing this back left and right and saying, well, our guy can do it because your guy did it. Americans are being trained to accept what would have once been unthinkable. Law enforcement that kills without consequence. Presidents who operate above the law. Wars launched without consent. Power exercised without accountability or authority. That normalization is the true danger. Which brings us to the question of common sense forced Americans to confront in 1776. And we have to confront it again now. Are we going to be a nation that is governed by laws or by the will of a man? Because that was the essence of common sense. Do we want to have a king that is going to just dictate to us? Or are we going to have consent of the governed? Are we going to have laws? Are we going to treat people as human beings rather than livestock? And as he points out, this was the moral foundations that we have lost are really the key. We used to have the Black Regiment when this country was formed, and you would have pastors who would put this in context for the people who they talked to. But he said, now we've got the Franklin Grahams of this world who've exchanged moral authority so they can have a seat at the table with Trump. As a matter of fact, we talk about Trump being a pedophile protector. One of his spiritual advisors, quote unquote, has just been convicted of pedophilia, and yet he got a slap on the wrist, just like Jeffrey Epstein. Isn't that interesting? So they have us believe that the lawful response with all this stuff is just to comply, just to obey, because they've got power. And I have to say, these people have exchanged Christ for Trump. Scripture, he says John Whitehead, does not command blind obedience to power. I agree with that. That's what's wrong with that interpretation of Romans 13. Chuck Baldwin, I interviewed him not too long ago, but prior to that, the last time I had interviewed him was several years ago, and it was a few years before we had 2020 and the pandemic lockdown and all the blind obedience to authority that's being sold by the people there. And we were talking about how that was going to work. You had all these people saying, well, you do whatever the government says. It doesn't matter, And as Todd Friel said, if the government tells you to put a pinwheel on your head, you put a pinwheel on your head. He was saying that on the cusp of Biden mandating the vaccine for people in order to have a job or a life or anything else, to mandate the bioweapon that Trump had created. He said that. I thought it was reprehensible then, and I still think it is. It's just amazing that he would say that. Tell people, if the government tells you to commit suicide, you commit suicide. Drink the Kool-Aid, inject the Kool-Aid. That's what Todd Friel was saying. I called him Pinwheel Friel. And again, blind obedience to power is not what we're told to do. Should you obey God or man? And just because these people are in power, they may be there as a means of testing you, but you don't obey them. Just take a look at, and that's what they were saying. Well, we had martyrs who, when they were told you have to worship Caesar as God, they said, I'm not going to do it, even under penalty of death. That's why I call them martyrs, because they were witnesses to what they had seen. And so they would come back and they say, well, of course, if they tell you to deny Christ or to, deny your convictions, you don't follow that. But when I interviewed Chuck Baldwin, we were talking about it, I said, you just wait. These same people who are telling you that now, when push comes to shove, they will tell you to obey the government instead of your convictions. And they did in 2020. They told people, shut the churches down. Okay, shut the churches down. Inject yourself with a bioweapon. Okay, yeah, do it. And these people like Franklin Graham were telling you to do that at the same time. He quotes here, John Whitehead quotes Martin Luther King Jr. said, and regardless of what you think of the man, take a look at what he has to say here. One has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. You have to have the discernment and the wisdom to distinguish between what is just and what is unjust. Whether you're talking about obedience to government or you're talking about war, are we fighting wars to save lives? Are we fighting wars to end them? Or are we fighting so that we can support the greed, avarice, and ambition of corrupt men in power? That's the real issue when it comes to wars. And the concerning thing is that when we look at what the churches have become, this is actually a comedy routine by a comedian. What's his name? Dustry? Is that his? Drewski. Is that his name?
Drewski, yeah.
Drewski, yeah. And, but, when I first saw this, I thought it was real. Take a look at what he's doing in terms of this is what mega churches look like. For those who are listening, he's suspended on wires.
Wanda told us earlier this month that she could not have a baby anymore. So I impregnated her with the word of God. I'm going to impregnate everyone with the word of God. You gonna get pregnant with the word of God. You gonna get pregnant with the word of God. You gonna get pregnant with the word of God.
TV evangelists. Mega churches.
I had somebody in the congregation.
Now he's up in the air again, suspended on ropes.
Because I'm a Christian and I walk in the blood of Jesus. Give him some praise.
Yeah, again, this is it's such a parody. It's blasphemy, right? And that's really what these mega churches have become. I see this guy suspended up and on the wires, and it's like, yeah, and I've seen the Christmas programs, the big churches in Dallas and everything they do that. They got flying angels and camels in the aisles and all the rest of it. It's become entertainment. It's like what we began talking about. We had Common Sense was bought by 120,000 people in just 3 months in the colonies, and it was something that was serious. Today, what do we look at? We're looking at the big sellers are Harry Potter, Hunger Games, 50 Shades of Grey. And that really is what the church has become. It's reflective of our society, all of that. So he says the same things that are running through, the themes that are running through Paine's Common Sense and later in his American Crisis are just as relevant now as they were 250 years ago. That is, that no ruler is above the law, no government is entitled to unchecked power, no people remain free who surrender their conscience to the ambitions of the powerful. And how do we discern all of this stuff? Well, that's where the churches have fallen down. They have become centers of entertainment as well. So with all this happening, we had the FBI raiding a reporter's home, citing a leak of classified documents. Now, this is the FBI, the Kash Patel FBI, and the War Pete Pentagon. And of course, remember, War Pete kicked out all of the news organizations. He said, I don't want you here. I don't want you getting any information that we don't want reported. You have to authorize it with me first. And we're going to come after people if we got any information like that. It's not that they're telling everybody, well, here's how you can defeat this particular weapon system. We just created a Death Star, and this is the vulnerability. No, it isn't that at all. It's not that at all. It's just anything that's critical of them. And so it's not a surprise at all to see this happening. This happened to a Washington Post reporter. It is kind of an interesting parallel to what we saw with the Pentagon Papers, isn't it? You know, we had Daniel Ellsberg, who had secrets that he had stolen, and he passed them off to Washington Post and New York Times. I think both of them got a copy of it. And so they had to decide whether they're going to publish this stuff or not. And it was not anything that was going to get anybody in trouble. It was about the conduct of the war and the attitude of the politicians. And the Supreme Court said, well, you can't come after the news organizations. You can come after the guy who stole the information and handed it over to him. But we have this thing called freedom of the press that is held in contempt by Pete Hegseth, held in contempt by Kash Patel, because it's held in contempt by their master, Donald Trump. So again, they're investigating this leak. It'll be interesting to see how this goes, because Trump has broken all of the conventions about freedom of the press and free speech, hasn't he? If you put something out that he doesn't like, then they are going to come after you. And it appears that this is going to be coming after her. They seized her phone, took her Garmin watch, which would have information about where she has been, that type of thing. And according to Pam Bondi, she said this past week at the request of the Department of War, the Department of Justice, and it's not a Department of War. They haven't officially changed the name. That would cost billions of dollars for them to do that. They haven't done that. This whole thing is a fantasy for them. The FBI executed a search warrant at the home of a Washington Post journalist who obtained and was obtaining and was reporting classified, illegally leaked information from a Pentagon contractor. And so I guarantee you, we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I can almost guarantee you that this is not going to be anything that's going to put anybody's lives in danger. This is going to be something that embarrasses Pete Hegseth. Well, let me tell you something he should be embarrassed about. Grok is going to get access to classified military networks, right? But not reporters. If you report something that a contractor has told you about their policy, they're going to try to throw you in jail. But they're going to give full access to all the classified military stuff that should be classified. That's going to go to Grok. This is how foolish Hegseth is. In December, Musk's chatbot, Grok, made headlines for casually distributing the private addresses and phone numbers of everyday people, scraping data from public sources with unsettling ease while other AI models refused. Now this same chatbot is going to be welcomed into a far more sensitive area. The people have told us that everything must be hidden for national security. Are going to now turn it over to a chatbot that doesn't have such a great record for confidentiality. This week, Pete announced that Grok will be integrated into the Pentagon's classified system later this month as part of a sweeping department-wide initiative to weaponize AI. Well, just be careful. You may have AI weaponized against you, is all I can say. Hegseth announced the creation of a new role within the Department of Defense the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Officer. As if we didn't already have enough artificial intelligence in the Pentagon before they had computers, right? It's like it's another one of these oxymorons. This is a guy who used to work at Amazon's web services because they've got a lot of government contracts, so they're pulling this guy in for that. Other AI models have their own ethics and safety issues. A Futurism survey of chatbots, including ChatGPT, Microsoft's Copilot, and Grok, found that only Grok was willing to give operational suggestions for hypothetical invasion of Greenland. The rest of them refused, citing international law and other ethical issues. So there you go. It's already set to go for Greenland. Rand Paul says that Trump's Department of Justice still has not acted on his criminal referral of Fauci. What a surprise. Are you surprised about that? And Fauci is a good example of this. He is the very embodiment of this stuff. Trump set him up as the viceroy, and maybe even, you could say even higher than that, because he bowed to Fauci. And last thing he did was to give him a medal. I know it was a commendation, not a physical medal, but that's the last thing that Trump did, was to honor him. The last thing that Biden did was to pardon him. Why does Rand Paul think he's going to get a referral, a criminal referral on Fauci? There's no way the system is going to do that. The system has protected him. You might want to start with something a little bit more obvious than what Rand Paul did. Now, what Rand Paul is saying is he was on Joe Rogan, and he said that he had been talking to RFK Jr., and RFK Jr., who does not like Fauci and really did a good job of exposing him. He wrote a whole book about Fauci. RFK Jr. told Rand Paul that Fauci had allegedly told people to destroy messages that he sent them after reading. Because he has been so connected with intelligence the entire time, hasn't he? I mean, going back to Dark Winter and other things like that, that's where the pandemic games came from. And so Rand Paul said, you can't do that. The executive branch, when they communicate, they're required to keep their communications. They're required to do it on governmental devices. So we have this evidence, and I've summarized it again as a criminal referral to President Trump, but they're not doing anything with it. I wonder why. You might want to start with, why was Fauci paid double what was legal for him to be paid? His salary was supposed to be capped as everybody's salary. His boss, his boss's boss, their salaries were capped beneath that of the vice president, which is just over $200,000. Fauci's salary was higher than the president's salary. It was well over $400,000. And so the question might start there. Why was he illegally compensated? And what other kinds of illegal compensation did he get in terms of royalties and other things like that? Start with the money. That'll get people's attention. We start talking about destroying things, and you start focusing on gain of function. Rand Paul doesn't seem to understand that the real gain of function from the COVID fraud, the COVID MacGuffin, the MacGuffin was there to give gain of function to the government. The government is a dangerous, deadly virus that is metastasized like a cancer. And really the gain of function that came from all that stuff was the fake pandemic. That's the worst gain of function that's there. But, of course, we've got people like Ursula fond of lying, and she has always hated free speech, remember?
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear Klaus, your annual global risk report makes for a stunning and sobering read. For the global business community, the top concern for the next 2 years is not conflict or climate. It is disinformation and misinformation, followed closely by polarization within our societies.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. You are listening to The David Knight Show.
Yeah, Ursula von der Leyen. She's now saying that free speech is a virus and we need to have a vaccine for it. She wants to kill you if you exercise. You know, the vaccine's going to kill you, right? Just like the Trump shot. And she has always been after free speech. And of course, you know, there at Davos, she was talking to Herr Klaus. Well, Trump's going to be there talking to Herr Klaus. Just remember the last time Trump went to Davos, we wound up with a global pandemic a couple of weeks later. So just hope that doesn't happen again. So again, the first sign of a scoundrel, I think, and a liar is somebody who seeks to censor other people. Someone like Ursula von der Leyen, somebody like Shlomo, the billionaire from Israel, who was saying, we have to kill the First Amendment in order to protect the First Amendment. The second sign is that they are doing this all as public officials. We have a right to privacy and secrecy, which they deny. Public officials, as I said before, the very word public means that it's common to all. So if you're a public official, the information that you have should be common to all. Everybody should know what you're doing. We should have transparency. She doesn't like that. In 2024, Ursula von der Leyen, who is the non-popularly elected president of the European Commission, the ultra girl boss extraordinaire, came out swinging against free speech in a white-knuckle speech in which she likened malign information, she said, to a virus society must be inoculated against via the vaccine of pre-bunking, is what she called. That's just censorship. But pre-bunking is actually even more than censorship. It's identifying people. It's what we talked about with the CCPA, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authentication, that Gates and Microsoft were pushing through, and they got hardware, software companies, as well as the people who are going to tell you what's true and not, you know, the establishment media like New York Times, Washington Post, BBC. And then once they got that, the hardware and software companies are going to label your content, whether it was a picture, text, or video, or audio. They would label it and prevent you from even uploading it. That'd be pre-bunking, right?
One of the sad things to me is I can imagine a lot of people would be ecstatic about this. From a young age, you know, I'm dumb, so I like to go on the internet and argue with people. I realized most people automatically default to argumentation from authority. Well, this person over here with a lab coat or a doctorate says this. I'm like, well, does it make any sense? Well, it doesn't matter. This person who got a degree said it, so your argument doesn't matter.
That's right. Yeah, they don't want to debate the facts. They don't want to do science. I remember at the beginning of this thing, I played the clip over, you know, the pandemic thing. They had 6 people in white lab coats, and there was going to be a person speaking. Before this person speaks, they want to have the authority of the people in white lab coats. So they had these people go out on stage. 3 of them go out on one side of the podium, cross their hands, stand there in their white lab coats. So you got 3 on each side in white lab coats, 6 total. And then the speaker comes out and takes the podium. That's the insanity of this. This is exactly what you're talking about, Travis. You're right. As technology evolves, we need to build up societal immunity, she said, around information manipulation. Research has shown that pre-bunking is more successful than debunking, and that prevention is preferable to a cure. Well, I just got to say to Ursula von der Leyen, her actual name is Ursula von Leyen, I guess, but anyway, she's fond of lying. I just got to say, I've got natural immunity to government lies. I don't need to be vaccinated anymore. Because, you know, it's like being exposed, right? According to virology, virology is the ultimate lie. But according to the science of virology, you know, you get exposed to something and you get immunity to it. Once you see how the government has lied, we should have all seen that in 2020. Once you see that, you should have immunity to government lies. And the fact that they forward their agenda just by labeling people and by then ranking them, which is what Shlomo was talking about. He wasn't just talking about censorship. He was talking about this pre-bunking. We're going to take something we disagree with, We're going to label that person as a terrorist or as a liar or whatever, and we're going to stop them from being able to publish anything whatsoever. And so we appreciate your support. Thank you for that. And that's our show for today. Tomorrow we're going to have a couple of great interviews. We're going to have the doctors, Dr. Sam Bailey and her husband, Mark Bailey, are going to be joining us from New Zealand. And Sam Bailey is the only person I know that has lost 2 careers over her integrity of opposing this COVID pandemic stuff. She had a very lucrative career as a very successful TV presenter in New Zealand. And both she and her husband are physicians. And we're going to talk in that interview about what was done to them. You won't believe what they did and what they're still doing to them, attacking them financially. After losing their careers as doctors because they told people the truth, and losing her career also as a presenter, they have held their line and they've kept their integrity. They're a real model for people. And they got a lot of information for you as well, not only about the vaccines, but about virology and viruses as well. So they're going to be joining us tomorrow. And Gerald Celente is going to be joining us, and he's going to talk about his trends for 2026. And I know a lot of people have been very interested to hear what Gerald Celente thinks is going to be happening in this very interesting year. So thank you for joining us today. Great program coming up tomorrow. Have a good day. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.